A grieving cowboy marries a silent stranger in a ghost town. Then a violent past comes calling. Can their fragile peace survive, or will everything burn again? The faint light of dawn creeps over the horizon, but the sky seems reluctant to shed the darkness, as if it too mourns for coy ransom. When he stands over his wife Anna's freshly dug grave, his breath catching in his throat, while the earth beneath his feet feels impossibly heavy, and he works the shovel with trembling hands, because no one else can tuck her gently into that narrow bed of dirt, knuckles coated in cold, damp dirt that speaks of the land's endless patience, while his own heart feels like it might crack in two at any moment. Who had faced plagues that swept through towns like a merciless wind, who had survived raids where strangers stole everything except her will to live, who endured droughts that turned fields into cracked, barren dust, had finally lost her life to the simple miracle of childbirth. Their son Elijah born silent and still, never taking his first breath, and Coy held Anna's cold body in his arms as he stared at her parted lips, searching for some last message she tried to send him from beyond that fragile veil between life and death. She was only 20, with so much of her story left unwritten and so much love to give, and now she was gone, and the world felt emptier than it ever had before, while around them, the cemetery lay hushed and still, the other graves worn and unremarkable, but this one felt different, charged with the finality of a promise broken by fate. Coy's boots sank slightly into the soft earth as he placed his shovel aside and lowered his head, letting memories of Anna flood him, her laughter like warm sunshine, her gentle hand brushing stray hair from his forehead when he returned home, her eyes alive as she tended their small garden, her voice singing as she baked bread in the small oven they had built together. The first time they met under an elm tree on the outskirts of town, her eyes shining with hope, even when the wind carried the smell of death from a distant plague camp. How she insisted on planting flowers around their cabin to remind them both that life could flourish even in rocky soil, but that memory now felt like a shard of glass in his chest, a beauty he could not bear to keep in his heart for much longer. As the sun climbed higher, Coy wiped the sweat and tears he did not realize he had shed from his face, Anna's final written wish lying folded in his pocket on a scrap torn from an old almanac where she had scrawled that, if she died, he was to burn the cabin they built with their own hands. By midday, the sun had broken through the clouds, casting harsh light on the little homestead they created together, and Coy began stacking the logs they had cut and milled side by side, each beam and each plank, and each nail holding a memory of shared triumphs, raising the walls brick by brick. The day they nailed the roof and danced in the dust, when a sudden wind nearly swept their careful work away, a reminder that even the strongest structures could fall blown by a single gust. Now, as he struck a single match and placed it at the base of the oldest board, the flames leaped up quickly, crackling and hissing as they consumed the walls, the roof collapsing in a shower of sparks, the porch where they once sat to watch for coyotes trembling before giving way to fire. Smoke drifted up in thick columns that blurred the boundary between earth and sky, carrying with it the scent of pine and finality, and Coy stood at a respectful distance, hat in hand, eyes dry despite the smoke that stung his nose and seared his lungs, because his grief had used up all the tears he ever had. The cab, once a symbol of hope and promise for a future filled with laughter and children's voices echoing in the rooms, was now ash and embers before his eyes, each spark that rose into the air feeling like a memory drifting upward until it vanished beyond reach. He wondered if each flicker held a piece of Anna's spirit, carried away by the wind to some place where she could be at peace. The fire burned hotter, and the walls collapsed inward, leaving only a skeletal frame that snapped under the flames, as if it could not bear the weight of loss for another moment. When the last of the timber gave way in a final roar, Coy took a step forward and scattered a handful of dirt onto the glowing coal, whispering Anna's name as if that could anchor her to the earth and keep her from slipping away forever. His horse, a silver-bellied gelding named Fence Post, watched from the corral, ears pricked as though sensing Coy's sorrow. He untied the worn leather reins and climbed into the saddle, feeling the familiar sway beneath him even as his legs felt weak and unsteady. Coy sat there a long moment staring at the smoldering ruin that once sheltered his love, feeling hollowed out and unsure if he could breathe without her by his side. But the world kept turning, and he knew that staying meant being swallowed by memories too painful to live with. So he nudged Fence Post with his heel and the horse stepped forward into the path that led west, where the sun now hung high and hot in the sky, mocking Coy's darkness. With each hoofbeat they carried him farther from the ashes of his past, and deeper into an unknown land where the future seemed as empty as his heart. He rode without destination or plan, a man stripped of purpose, and with each mile a question burned in his mind. Where does a man go when everything he loved has turned to dust? Would he ever find another reason to wake with the sunrise, to mend a fence, to plant a seed? Was his life now destined to drift like a ghost across endless plains? The road stretched before him, a ribbon of dirt winding through fields and scrub, promising both danger and possibility. As the sun dipped toward the west, Coy thought of Anna's words at the end, written with hope that he might honor her memory and find new meaning. But in that moment he could only focus on putting one foot in front of the other, and one hoof in front of the other, until the world changed enough that he could breathe again. Night fell cold and quiet, and Coy camped by a battered fence post, just beyond a dry creek, listening to the coyotes echo his sorrow under a sky spangled with stars that felt too distant to offer comfort. In the flickering firelight, he traced lines in the dirt with his finger, wondering if any path could lead him to healing, or if his sorrow would cling to him like a shadow that never relents. The next morning a lone traveler passed him on a rutted trail, tipping his hat and offering a quiet greeting before slipping away. Coy felt a flicker of curiosity about that stranger's story. What loss or hope drove him down this same road? Perhaps there was a town ahead where a new life could be built, or perhaps the horizon held only more emptiness. But Coy could not turn back now even if he wanted to, because his past was a prison of ash and memory that offered no place. 3 weeks after burning his home and riding with nothing but sorrow in his saddlebag, Coy Ransom drifts into Hollow Bend, a worn-out settlement perched on the dusty banks of Snackwater Creek, where wooden buildings lean under years of dust and wind, their paint faded to ghostly echoes of color, and the air itself tastes of dry, hard times and broken promises. The town feels hollow, as if its soul slipped away with the last preacher, who stopped by, and Coy's boots kick up dust as he moves past boarded-up shops, whose windows stare blankly at him, like empty eye sockets. A jailhouse stands with no sheriff to keep order, its door swinging on rusted hinges to a beat of silent despair, and the church's steeple points crookedly at the sky, its once proud bells silent. Since the preacher began drinking at sunrise, Coy finds a night's rest at the livery, trading labor for a coarse bed and a hunk of stale bread instead of cash, and he drinks only on days when he finds a few coins, the whiskey warming the hollow ache in his chest, but doing nothing to dispel the memories of Anna's laughter, or the sight of their cabin burning. He says almost nothing to the townsfolk, letting his grief swallow him like quicksand, and they give him a wide berth. Ensam, a man without questions, has nothing left to say of value. The saloon doors swing open more for show than any real customers, and the tavern keeper, weary from lip-reading more rumors than news, nods at Coy as he passes, his eyes already turning back to a glass of bitter ale. The wind howls down the empty streets at night, and Coy lies awake in the loft over the stables, listening to horses shuffle and the creek whisper against its banks, wondering if any place on this earth will ever keep him from feeling broken. On his 4th day in Hollow Bend, Coy's head is heavy with thoughts of abandonment, and the sun is high when a strange sight stops him in the dusty street. A bride in a blue calico dress stands alone, her posture so still she seems more a statue than a woman, her train of white faded to brown along the hem, and no escort, No luggage, no visible expression on her face, only a blank stare that feels like a challenge to the world. If anyone had the right to stop and ask a million questions, it was her. Townsfolk whisper as they pass, voices hushed like they speak of ghosts, saying she came from Nebraska by stagecoach, bound for a man named Harris or perhaps Harlan. But no Harris and no Harlan ever answered for her. Coy watches from a sagging bench outside the general store as she stands by a single worn wooden trunk that looks too small to hold every possession she claims, head tilted slightly as if listening for a name to call in response. Yet nobody does. He studies her stillness, feeling something in his chest tighten until he can almost hear his heart sputter like a dying lantern, because in her silence he recognizes his own pain, hidden and unspoken, and a flicker of curiosity ignites. Why is she here? And what tragedy followed her across the plains to this forgotten bend of the creek? After a moment that stretches like a ribbon of old scars, the bride finally steps forward, her shoes stirring dust with each careful step, and Coy glances up as she approaches him. His voice feels foreign in his mouth when he says, "Your man didn't come," and her eyes, a gray so pale they seem almost colorless, meet his without blinking, as she replies with a single word. No, he wants to ask her name, to force words from her lips so he can anchor her to some reality beyond that aching silence. But when he tries, she only says, "I have one," and turns her eyes skyward as if she won't waste breath on strangers. Something in him softens at that refusal, a kinship born from knowing what it means to be left behind when you expected rescue. Coy shifts in his seat, feeling the coarse wood under his rough trousers, and tasting dust in the back of his throat, and he remembers Anna's steady smile when he first pulled her hand toward him in a crowded dance hall, the way her eyes crinkled around the edges when she laughed, and he thinks how easy it is to lose people you love most, so he surprises himself when he quietly asks her to marry him, not with money, not with promise of land or livestock, but with his own shared loneliness and a simple vow, "I know what it is to be left behind." In that moment, something trembles in her chest as if her heart has been sleeping, and his words are the first sunrise it has seen in months. She lifts her hand, the fingers brushing against his calloused palm, and in the hush of that dusty afternoon, two wounded souls find an unspoken promise of one another, a fragile trust that feels as unexpected as rain in a desert. Coy imagines them married as soon as the sun sets, standing before the town's few spectators under the crooked steeple of the church, their vows spoken in gravelly voices that crack like old boards underfoot, and he wonders what will happen when the world outside this hollow town tries to break the quiet peace they've carved together, because beneath his offer lies a question he doesn't yet know how to ask. Can they heal each other's broken edge, or will their past sorrows conspire to turn this small hope to dust? The bride offers a slow dust-covered nod as twilight approaches, and Coy can almost feel the hush of the town holding its breath like a secret poised to unfold. While shadows stretch long as questions coil in the corners of their quiet meeting, Coy wonders if she will ever share the name she guards so carefully, if her silence is shield or shackles, and he is torn between urging her to speak and protecting her solitude. As she steps away to look down the empty road, he watches her silhouette against the sinking sun, feeling the pulse of her sorrow resonate with his own, as if their griefs are two notes in the same mournful song. Townsfolk watch from ramshackle porches, curious eyes glinting with wonder and worry in equal measure, but none dare interrupt the fragile moment between the bride in blue and the man in faded boots. The wind stirs her skirt and lifts fine strands of hair from her pale face, and Coy envies the soft curls that hide her expression even now, longing to see if sorrow or relief flickers behind those guarded eyes. And though he speaks no more that afternoon, his offer lingers between them, a question written on a summer breeze that may vanish with the next shift of wind, or take root like wildflowers in a cracked earth. His grief-scarred heart flickers, curious to know what stories this bride might carry, where she fled from, and why she stopped in Hollow Bend of all places. And he senses that her past is a maze of shadows he cannot yet navigate even if he follows her every step, yet he hopes, perhaps foolishly, that in sharing silence and space they might become maps for each other's despair, guiding one another back towards something like hope. The day closes with golden light dying behind distant ridges, and Coy rises from the bench, offering a hand for her to take as they walk side by side toward the sagging church, where in the stillness they might find a borrowed preacher, a few witnesses, and the courage to forge a new bond on the ashes of their past pains. Curiosity hums beneath Koi's ribs like a restless insect. He wonders if companionship can be enough to chase away ghosts, if two broken souls can piece together a life where laughter might one day replace tears, if trust can grow from shared wounds instead of promises of gold or land. Questions he keeps hidden behind a gentle smile as they step through the town's single gate, leaving behind whispered rumors and open sky bound by a promise neither fully understands but both secretly cling to as the only anchor left in a world that once held everything they loved. And though the future is as uncertain as the fluttering of a lone swallow against a burning sky, in that single moment Koi feels a spark of something he thought he lost forever, a fragile pulse of curiosity that perhaps together they can learn to follow toward a dawn neither can yet see. Without music or rings, they marry before nightfall, two souls battered by loss, yet clinging to the faint promise of something new. The preacher, his eyes bleary and face pale from one too many last nights at the saloon bar, barely manages to force out the ancient words, his voice cracking like old leather, as he speaks of love and honor. Koi's rough hand, calloused from years of hard work and sorrow, reaches for Mara's slender fingers and wraps around hers, offering an unspoken vow of support as dusk presses in around them like a silent witness to their unlikely union. The sky loses color, fading from dusty orange to bruised purple, and the air grows cooler, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and distant rain. That night they share a simple meal in the low-lit livery, cold biscuits, still warm from oven fire, and tinned peaches, whose syrup sticks to their fingers as they eat in near darkness. No candles burn to chase away shadows, and the lanterns hanging overhead cast long spindly shapes across rough wood walls. They sit across from one another at a plank table, neither speaking. Instead they listen to the soft whicker of horses in their stalls, and the coo of an owl perched beyond the stable door. After the final crumb is eaten, Koi unrolls a worn blanket over the straw-strewn floor, and Mara climbs onto the makeshift bed beside him without a word. She lies still and silent, as if each breath is an intrusion on a fragile peace, and he feels the rise and fall of her chest beneath the thin cotton of her blue calico dress. Koi doesn't press for conversation. His own grief has taught him the weight of silence, how words can wound when hearts are raw and tender. In the gentle darkness, his mind drifts back to Anna's laughter, and the warmth of her hand, then returns to the present, as he senses Mara shiver in the cool night air. He shifts closer and nudges her with his shoulder, giving her a space that is both companionable and respectful. In response, Mara adjusts the blanket, folding it back over them like a shield, but still no words pass between them. Instead they exchange glances that say more than speech could convey. Koi notes the faint tremor in her fingers, as if memories he cannot access haunt her in the dark. In the days that follow, they find a routine unspoken but understood. Mara rises before dawn each morning, slipping out of the livery before the stable hand arrives to feed the horses. She steps into the chilly morning air, her breath visible in thin clouds, as she makes her way to the cold pump near the edge of town. She draws water in a battered tin bucket, and the metal handle grows numb in her grip, but she follows this ritual without haste, as if the act itself grants her a measure of control in a life unraveled by ghosts. Koi watches from the loft window, still wrapped in his blanket, and wonders what thoughts stir behind her distant gaze, as she tilts her head to catch the first grey light of dawn. Mara fills a chipped basin and washes her face, splashing the icy water against her cheeks, until she looks pale and determined, then retrieves a worn cloth to dry her skin, her movements quiet and deliberate. After tending to herself she returns to the livery's hearth, where Koi stokes embers from the previous night's fire to coax new warmth. They share a pot of weak coffee and coarse homemade cornbread scraps, eating in companionable silence, as the sun lifts over the horizon and breathes color into the dusty road. Neither speaks of their pasts, but Koi watches Mara's hands as they move, delicate yet steady as she mends the sleeves of his threadbare coat, her fingers deftly weaving thread through worn fabric, the needle glinting in morning light. She works without asking for payment or praise, and when he offers a few coins he found the day before, Mara simply shakes her head, folding the coat and returning it to him with a curt, almost imperceptible nod. In her small acts of care, repairing a loose seam, preparing a pot of beans for their midday meal, refilling his flask with fresh water. Koi senses a depth of pain she keeps hidden, a sorrow he recognizes but cannot name. She never meets his eyes for long. Instead she looks past him, as if navigating memories he cannot follow. Koi respects her silence, knowing from his own grief that the heart cannot always carry its burden out loud. Hollow Bend's residents watch the pair with wary curiosity. Men stand on the dusty boardwalks near the general store, arms crossed, whispering that the quiet woman in a blue calico dress is dangerous because she never speaks of her past, and rumors spread that perhaps she must have killed a man, maybe Harris or Harlan, and forgotten to bury him when she fled Nebraska. Women lean from hitching posts, their gowns fluttering in the breeze, exchanging worried glances as they watch Mara stack firewood or sweep the livery's floor. Children stare from dusty windows, toes curling on wide sills, as they wonder if the silent bride will one day reveal a secret that could swallow the whole town. Some joke that she stitches in silence because her fingers can do more damage than her tongue, but no one knows for sure, and the stories grow darker with each retelling. Koi hears these rumors, but he chooses not to judge or correct them. He has seen worse in the world, seen men sell their souls for land, witnessed families broken by plague and lawlessness, and he perceives in Mara's steady quiet a strength that no words need prove. He often finds her near the trough by the saloon, tying up a stray dog or murmuring a soft hush to a hurt calf. In her presence animals seem to calm, as if they sense her pain and trust her unspoken kindness. Yet when Koi approaches to offer a kind word or a simple question, Mara stiffens, her back straightening as if bracing against an invisible weight, and he takes the cue to step away, leaning against the fence in old leather boots, gazing across the creek at a ridgeline hazy with midday heat. He wonders what nightmares she carries, what faces from her past appear in her dreams, and leave her breathless in the dark. Does she wake at night stumbling to the pump in darkness, water spilling over her hands, as she tries to wash away memories that refuse to fade? Does she hear the echo of a man's voice, Crail perhaps calling her name in a rage that never died? Koi does not know, but he imagines her standing in a room where the light is dim, and the air is thick with fear, and he wonders if he might ever coax the truth from her lips with gentle patience. Each morning Koi adds a small log to the fire, and Mara gathers brush from the edge of town to feed it, her arms bare to the elbows and muscles flexing steadily in the light. They work side by side without speaking, a choreography of unspoken understanding, sharing the same space yet leaving room for the ghosts that trail behind them. When the wind picks up and rattles the building, Mara pauses and lifts a hand to steady a loose board, while Koi steps forward, placing a strong grip on her shoulder, not to question but to anchor her in the present. At midday they share a lunch of boiled beans and cornbread scraps, seated on overturned buckets near the stable door. Mara hands Koi a spoon without looking at him, and he watches her fingers tease stray threads from the seam of her dress, thoughtful and precise, as if mending her clothing helps her to mend something inside. One evening, Koi returns from splitting logs for work, to find the trapdoor open, and a bloodied stock boy crawling out of their loft, the boy's eyes wide with fear, as blood seeps from a wound in his side, and Mara stands above him, with a knife gripped in her trembling hand, her skirt torn and damp with crimson, her face pale, but resolute. Koi's heart pounds as he rushes forward, hauling the boy out into the street, ignoring the murmur of onlookers, who stare with wide eyes, and he warns them to back away, or face worse if they cross him. The boy collapses into his arms, and Koi presses a hand to the wound, as the blood seeps through his fingers, thinking only of saving this life, even as his mind reels at how Mara could have been forced into such desperate violence. Back in the loft, Koi's breath comes in sharp gasps, as he checks Mara's pulse. Remarkably, she is shaken but unhurt, a cold sweat tracing rivulets down her temples, and he kneels beside her, gripping her arm and feeling her tremble, like a wounded animal. The loft is dim, lit by the fading sun, through a small window, yet shadows dance across Mara's face, emphasizing the hollow she seems to carry within her eyes. "I thought I was purchased," she whispers, voice rough and distant, as though those words have traveled through a lifetime of fear and regret before reaching his ears. In that moment, Koi's chest tightens at the weight of her confession, and he struggles to find words, because he senses the ocean of pain rising behind each syllable, as if her past has clawed its way into the present, and refuses to let go. Mara lowers her gaze, tears pooling in her eyes, and Koi, knowing better than to push her to speak, waits in silence until her next breath comes steady enough to anchor her. Slowly, she tells him her secret. She was promised to a man named Krail, who beat his first wife to death and sent west under false pretenses, a fate she discovered only upon arrival when the world she believed in shattered into shards of violence and coercion. She explains how she escaped the stagecoach in Ogallala, burning the letter that bound her to him, changing her name, and fleeing to Hollow Bend in the hope that this forgotten place, along Snarkwater Creek, would hide her from cruelty. As Mara recounts the fear that haunted her every step, Koi's jaw tightens, and anger blooms at the cruelty she managed to leave behind. He feels a fierce protectiveness surge through him, imagining the horrors she endured before she found him, and the refuge he offered her, no matter how unspoken that refuge might have seemed. He reaches into his saddlebag, and pulls out a faded sheriff's badge, once his own, left behind when he abandoned titles and law to run from his own grief, and lays it before Mara on the loft floor, the metal dulled by years of handling, and the weight of its promise to protect and serve. But Mara looks at the badge as if it is a symbol of everything she fears, a man's authority that could once claim her without question. She refuses it, her voice steady as steel when she says she won't be the woman waiting on a man to save her, and Koi nods, knowing that even in his desire to protect her, he must respect her strength and autonomy. The next morning, as dawn's first light filters through half-washed skies, a tall, scarred man named Krail rides into Hollow Bend, his boots stirring dust as he spurs his horse toward the livery where Koi and Mara have stayed, his eyes scanning the town for his intended bride. Koi sees him dismount with a rifle slung low across his back, and a cruel set to his mouth, and when Krail strides into the saloon, he announces loudly that he has come to claim his bride before sundown. The townsfolk freeze mid-step, glasses of whiskey forgotten, breath held as if the very air has grown heavy with dread. Krail, greeting everyone with a crooked smile that reveals a glint of malice, leaves no doubt that he intends to find Mara and force her into the marriage she rejects. Koi steps forward, rifle held steady at his side, barrel pointing between Krail's legs, as he says, "You found the wrong town. She's not for sale," his voice low but unwavering. Krail sneers, looking over the dusty street to where Mara stands at Koi's side, her shoulders squared, eyes hard with the same resolve that once made her stand guard with a knife against the stock boy. He tells Koi that by sundown, Mara will be his, and a ripple of fear and determination settles in Mara's eyes. She lifts her chin as if meeting a storm head-on, and for the first time, Koi feels her pain sharpen into something like steel. Despite his vow to avoid rash violence, Koi senses there is no other way when Krail burrows beneath the saloon's swinging doors and steps into the town square at dusk, the golden light falling on Mara like a spotlight. Krail's voice drips with condescension as he calls out to her, "Come to me, bride," and the hush that falls over Hollow Bend is so complete Koi can hear his own heartbeat in his ear. In that tense moment, Mara lashes out first, her blade flashes in the dying sunlight as she lunges forward, yanking Krail close by the collar and cuts deep into his thigh, the knife sinking with a wet rasp that makes bystanders. Krail staggers, blood splattering on the dusty ground, and Koi fires a single shot into Krail's shoulder, the bullet tearing through muscle and bone, to send him crashing to the earth in a heap of shredded cloth and broken pride. Townsfolk watch, mouths agape, as Mara stands over Krail, her breathing steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, her eyes cold and sure when she whispers, "I'm not yours," her words slicing through the dusk like a blade itself. Krail bleeds in the dust as silence grips Hollow Bend, and when he finally drags himself away at dawn on a stolen pony, nursing his wounds and his wounded pride, the town seems to exhale in relief as if a long-held breath has been released. Koi and Mara stand side by side as the sun rises, casting pink and orange across the sky, and the townspeople, some still with tears in their eyes from witnessing Mara's courage, begin to whisper words of respect, no longer daring to spread rumors about her strength or her part. In that quiet aftermath, Mara and Koi share a look heavy with unspoken understanding. Their scars brought them together, and now they stand as one, ready to face whatever comes next, knowing they have already survived the darkest of horrors, and emerged still standing, bound by their shared determination to protect one another, and to build a life from the ashes of what once sought to destroy them. In the weeks that follow, Hollowbend changes slowly and almost imperceptibly, as if the town itself is learning to breathe again after a long-held exhale of fear and uncertainty. Mara takes in work mending clothes by day, her nimble fingers sewing torn hems and patching seams for neighbors whose garments bear the marks of hardship, and by midday she moves from stitching to tending the town's wounds, carefully cleaning cuts, binding sprains, and offering a quiet, calming presence to those who flinch at every sudden sound, her steady gaze conveying empathy without needing words. Each dawn, Coy emerges with his rifle slung across his back, not to claim the badge he once wore, but to keep watch in case ghosts from the past return to haunt Hollowbend, and he stands sentinel by the edge of the newly patched up shack they've claimed outside town, the wood still fresh from repairs, while Mara tends their small garden of compact rows, turnips, beans, and carrots, carefully burying seeds under warm soil, as though sowing hope where despair once ruled. Mara finds calm in the predictable rhythm of the garden, pulling weeds before sunrise, feeling the earth crumble between her fingers, watching first green shoots peek through dirt, as proof that life continues despite dark times. And Coy finds peace watching her, grateful for the silence that now feels safe instead of haunted, for the way her shoulders relax when they are together, and for the way she lets him stand close without speaking until the sun dips below the dusty ridge. As they rebuild their home, word of Mara's healing touch spreads, and the town warms to her, no longer a mute shadow at the livery, but someone who fixes clothes, tends wounded men's broken pride. Folks start to greet her quietly in the street, with nods or low bows, thankful for the shirt she repaired, or the bandage she wrapped, and children who once dared not approach now smile shyly when she kneels to tie their shoelaces. Yet beneath this fragile calm, Coy senses danger still lingers, a silent rumble like thunder building on the horizon. One moonless night, compelled by a restless unease, he ventures into the charred remains of the burned church, where ash still clings to splintered pews, and the pulpit stands half collapsed, and a bitter sourness in the air twists his stomach, as if smelling rot, though nothing living remains to rot. He runs his fingers along singed wood, finding old scorch marks where the fire burned hottest, and in the heavy hush that follows, he feels the weight of eyes watching him from the darkness just beyond broken windows. Then 10 days after Crail's exit, an 11-year-old girl named Ruthie March disappears from her family's homestead, and her mother finds only broken branches and a torn ribbon caught on tall grass, panic rippling through town like a sudden chill wind. Coy and Mara work side by side, following small shuffling tracks that lead to a fence post 2 miles away, where they find Ruthie tied and bruised, her eyes wide with terror, tears streaking dirt on her cheeks as she stares at tall grass beyond, and when she finally speaks, her voice trembling, she names the kidnapper's leader, a name that tastes like poison on Coy's tongue. Mara's face goes pale and her knuckles turn white around the sleeve of Coy's coat as he kneels beside Ruthie, gently unties reckless knots, and asks, "What did he say?" Ruthie's voice is a brittle whisper of unspoken horrors. "He said, reading sends regards." Coy's grip on his rifle tightens, until his knuckles ache, and he stands slowly, the rifle feeling too small in his hands. The town feels its bones creak under this new threat. Some residents lock doors and bars hiss across windows, others load wagons debating a hasty escape, but most faces set with determination to protect what they've built from ruin. In the dim light of dawn, riders circle the ridge above town, their silhouettes sharp against pale sky, and Coy calls the town to prepare as the breeze carries the taste of trouble, a bitter flavor that lingers on the tongue long after the wind has shifted. And though fear coils in every heart, a fierce curiosity stirs. What kind of man is reading to command such terror? What does he want beyond destruction? And will this town's quiet resilience be enough to stand against the darkness bearing down upon them? One night, Coy and Mara stand at the patched-up shack's edge, their breath hanging in the cool air, as they see the faint wisp of smoke curling above the ridge beyond Hollowbend, and their hearts clench without a single word. because they know it's a warning from Crail's new master, whose threat looms larger than any they have faced. Coy's jaw tightens as he watches the grey plume drift toward a darkening sky, streaked with purple and crimson, and he rushes into the quiet settlement to warn the townsfolk, his boots kicking up dust as he calls out for everyone to gather near the old church in the center of town, where some already stand with anxious faces. As dusk falls, some brave souls dig trenches around the perimeter, shovels glinting under the last light of day, while others reinforce doors with scrap wood and barbed wire, their hands shaking but determined, and they hang the chick's bell atop tall timbers, not for worship, but as an alarm system to ring if Redding's men should approach. Inside the dimly lit interior, Mara sits on a bench beside Claimer, a woman with fierce eyes. They took in after the conflict with Crail, and Mara stitches bandages while Claimer loads shells into worn rifles, her fingers moving quickly to prepare for the fight ahead. Outside, Coy teaches the boys to shoot, showing them how to steady their aim and breathe in slowly, explaining that their lives now depend on their ability to stand firm when fear tries to pull them down. And as the night deepens, every man, woman, and even a few of the older children take turns taking watch from behind barricades of sandbags, their faces lit by lantern glow and hardened by resolve, mixed with dread. At dusk, when lantern light battles shadows in the empty streets, Redding's first contingent arrives, 5 riders with faces covered by bandanas, their horses well fed and steady as they step into Hollow Bend, and when they dismount, their boots kick up dust that swirls like ghosts around them, and the woman leading them, her voice sharp as a knife, demands that Mara be handed over immediately, calling her property that must be surrendered to prove the town's loyalty to Redding. Coy steps forward, rifle leveled, his voice low but steel strong. "She's not property," and the rider snarls back, "Then let him come claim her himself," her words echoing in the silent streets, as if challenging the wind. Without warning, gunfire erupts, the sharp crack of Coy's rifle shattering the night, as his bullet tears through a wooden signpost, sending splinters flying, and the townsfolk take cover behind barrels and wagons, returning fire with steady aim, while Mara and Claimer move like shadows through side alley, blades drawn in that eerie half-light, striking swiftly and silently, their movements a dance of lethal grace that leaves 3 of Redding's gang dead before the night fully settles. One of the riders, wounded but alive, staggers away into darkness to warn his master, and another, his horse rearing, bolts toward the ridge. As the final echo of gunfire dies, Mara's eyes burn with a cold light Coy has never seen before. She will not allow more terror in her town, and as the last of Redding's first wave falls, Hollow Bend stands bloodied but unbroken. When dawn finally breaks, the ridges glow in soft gold, and the trenches line the east trail like silent sentinels. Tripwires guard entrances, and the church bell stands proud atop its timbers, ready to ring at a moment's notice. Coy tends his wounded shoulder where a stray bullet grazed him, leaving a shallow cut, but he stays upright, rifle in hand, as he helps Mara inspect the barricades, her knives stained but her spirit unbroken, and the townspeople gather in the growing light, their faces dark with fatigue, but their eyes shining with a steely acceptance. They will fight again if needed, even as they tend to the dead and wounded, because bonds have formed between them through shared fear, and the knowledge that they survive together. Beneath it all, a question lingers like the taste of ash in the morning air. Will Redding's main force come next? And if so, will their united courage and these crude defenses be enough to save their town once more? Unite now. Weeks pass, and spring drags on, but the threat never fades. Mango seeds of potatoes rot in cold soil, where Coy once hoped for a harvest, their small garden patch turning to mud and mildew under damp skies, while he strings barbed wire around the edge of their land, driving each post deep into the ground with heavy hammer strikes, sweat mixing with dirt on his face as he works, knowing every knot of wire he fastens is meant to keep bloodshed farther from their door. And Mara stands watch atop the bluff every dawn, her silhouette sharp against a sky that fades from violet to pale yellow, her eyes scanning the distant ridges for any sign of movement, her breath visible in the chill morning air that stings her lungs. And each morning she returns with a slow, steady pace, boots pressing gravel into the edge of town, like she treads on memories she can never quite leave behind. One evening, as the sun bleeds into purple clouds, 7 riders arrive, wearing long black coats, and the iron pin of the red watch on their lapels, that ominous symbol of Reading's private militia, that spreads fear through their town, like wildfire. And Mara, standing on a small rise, sees the red eye insignia, and feels her heart wrench in her chest. She whispers, "Red watch," and Coy nods grimly beside her, his jaw set like stone. "Then we'll be ready." At dusk, when the sun sinks behind distant hills, and the sagebrush glows gold and rust, Reading's force advances in silence, moving as one through fading light toward Hollow Bend, and Coy rings the church bell once, a single peal that echoes through dust-choked streets, sending a ripple of alarm through every home. The town, roused by the clang, takes positions. Coy climbs atop the feed store roof, placing his rifle against the wooden peak, with trembling hands, his wounded shoulder a dull ache that reminds him he is still alive. Claimer takes a rifle to a curtained window in the sawmill, her face steeled and eyes glinting with determination as she waits to fire. Women and children gather behind makeshift barricades of overturned wagons, barrels, their faces pale as they clutch muskets or old revolvers handed down from fathers and brothers who have ridden off to fight. Candles flicker in windows as the last glow of sun retreats, and hearts pound beneath rough spun shirts and work-worn vests, each person poised between fear and resolve. Bullets crack like thunder. The first shot tears through Grieving's weathered sign, sending splinters flying into the dusk, while townsfolk duck behind cover, returning fire that lights the night with flickers of flint and steel. Coy fires again and kills 2 riders whose horses stumble and collapse in the dusty lane, but a glancing shot grazes his shoulder, the bullet burning like hot iron as he slumps but refuses to fall. Vision blurs around the edges, yet he fights on with a fragged breath that tastes of smoke and gunpowder. Mara moves like a shadow through narrow alleys, her knives flashing under the pale moon as she strikes silently, swiftly, cutting throats, severing arteries, targeting soft spots where even the hardiest of men fall quickly. She fights with calm purpose, without rage, as if ending something that needed ending for years, hearing the hollow echo of each body hitting the ground and knowing that every life saved in Hollow Bend comes from her steel blade. Only Reading himself remains standing in the center of the square, stepping forward with measured calm in his gray hair and black coat. He speaks in a low, resonant voice that carries over the roar of battle. "Reading, I come when something needs ending." His words hang in the smoky air like a curse, and for a moment the world stills. Mara steps from the shadows, boots stained red from the night's fighting, and meets his gaze with eyes cold and unyielding. She replies quietly, her voice carrying more authority than any preacher's sermon. "I ended you years ago. I'm justice, without a badge, without a god." Her words strike deeper than any bullet, as Reading draws a thin silver pistol from within his coat. The metal glints as he raises it, and time slows as he takes aim. The shot echoes off wooden buildings, but Mara ducks low, rolls across gravel, and in one fluid motion her knife glides from her boot sheath, slicing into Reading's back straight to the spine. He staggers, blood surging through his shirt, a guttural groan escaping as he reaches for his throat, and slits it in a final act of desperation. The square falls silent, heavy with grief and release, because in that moment Reading's threat evaporates like mist in the sun, and Hollow Bend stands victorious but wounded under moonlit sky. Coy, bleeding but alive, crawls to Mara's side, who trembles for the first time since he met her, her knees shaking as sorrow and relief mix in her eyes. He catches her as she falters, feeling her breath hitch as tears threaten to break free, and he offers a steady hand to help her rise as dawn's first grey light begins to creep across dust-covered streets. In the pale morning they bury Reading's body in the canyon behind a ridge, grave marked by a simple pile of stones instead of crosses, and Coy lights Reading's coat ablaze until only smoke remains, a final act of cleansing fire. They do not return to their shack that night. Instead they stand together in the dark wind whipping their coats, the world beyond wide and silent. Mara looks at Coy and says quietly, "If more come, I'll be ready." Coy studies her in the flickering light, his heart swelling with pride and relief, and he replies with a soft smile, "You're not the girl they sent, you're the one who came back." They hold hands beneath a sky spattered with stars, not from fleeting romance but from shared scars and recognition, that in this world of dust and danger, they have forged a home from ruin, bound by the promise to protect one another forever. Hollow Bend's residents emerge from hideaways, faces pale in the morning glow, and they gather around the bell tower, murmuring words of gratitude and relief, each heart sharing a flicker of curiosity about what tomorrow might bring, wondering if this fragile peace can hold against unseen threats beyond the ridge. And as Mara and Coy stand hand in hand, they realize their journey is not over. Their scars serve as reminders of lives nearly shattered, and yet in each new sunrise they see promise, because even amidst ruin, there is strength in unity and hope that the dawn will always follow the darkest night.